Hey all, welcome to this video. In this we will be learning what is agentic AI and what is AI agent and what they mean. So let us begin. So there are different definitions that you can find across the internet of what AI agent and agentic AI mean. And some of the time it is confusing and some of the time it is used interchangeably, but that is not the case. Each of them mean different thing. So let us try to understand them. So in IT, the end product that we basically develop, it is most commonly called as a software component, right? So in terms of the web development practice, your website can be your end software. In terms of robotic process automation, the robot can be your end software, right? So likewise, here your AI agent, it is nothing but the software component, right? And as any other software component, it is built on certain approaches, on certain discipline, right? So here, this AI agent software, it is built on the agentic AI principle or system, you can call it, right? Now, what makes this system special and stand out from all the technologies that we have? So in this system, it is capable enough to produce a software that can decide on its own on what it has to do next, right? And not only that, it can execute that on a real environment, right? Now that is a very high level definition of what this agentic AI system actually mean. And throughout this video, we will dig deeper into that and we will try to decode on what it is and why it actually makes sense. So in a nutshell, if you want to call it agentic AI, it is nothing but a system through which we are building this end software component, which is the AI agents. Okay. Now let us try to understand that with one more analogy. Okay. So on the screen, you can see an orchestra system where we have different musicians playing their part. We have different singers singing their part, right? And at the end, this complete system, it works on certain principles, on certain rule books, right? But what is the end goal of this entire system? It is to produce a beautiful synchronized version of a song, right? So if you want to compare it with AI agent and agentic AI, the orchestra system on its own, you can say that as a agentic AI, right? Where it is built on certain discipline, on certain, practice, on certain rule book, right? That is the entirety of the system. Whereas the output that is been delivered here, the end product, which is the song, it is nothing but your AI agent. I hope this makes sense in terms of understanding what this keyword means in relative to each other. Okay. And we'll try to decode why it makes sense now. So number one is you are actually building the system that can do more than just the response generation. So if you are using some product like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, you might have used it for getting some answers to your queries, right? But here with the agentic AI, it can do more than that. It can actually take those actions on a real context, right? For example, you're building this agent that can read through that emails, right? And not only it can tell you, hey, this is what the email means, or this is what the category it right fits into. It can go ahead and can take action, based on the categories or based on the different, conditions that you set up, right? So more than just generating what it actually means, it can do actions on the real environment, right? Then, so typically, if you want to code for, like an automation or a software to develop, you basically have to, code for the end-to-end steps. You actually have to say, hey, what comes after that, right? What functions you want to invoke after this particular point, right? But here it works completely different. Here the approach is different. So if you want to learn agentic AI, the number one thing that comes is you need to understand the approach here, right? So here, instead of going by the task-oriented approach, you have to shift the focus to a goal-oriented approach. Right. Now, what it means? Now, instead of coding for each step one by one, you will give the entire instruction of what this agent actually has to do, and you will be giving the relevant context and also the tool set on which it has to perform the operation, right? And on the real environment, on a given scenario, the agent will decide on itself like a plan of action and it will execute that. Okay. So next comes one more important feature about agentic AI, that it can run on any environment without breaking its part, right? So typically, if you're building automation, you'll be accounting for the negative case scenarios as well. And in the negative case scenarios, at most you will be saying that, okay, send an email to so and so support team so that they can take an action. But here, if let's say anything new comes up, right, or the environment changes on its own, it will not break. So if I want to give an example for this, let's say you're building this automation that works well on a given form, and tomorrow the layout of the form changes, the position of the field changes. So in that case, the agent will recognize what the new field means, right? It will automatically do a mapping or where it has to fill in the data, right? So that you don't have to kind of rework your code or modify your code. So the agent can understand what it actually means, and it can adapt to the new condition, to the new environment, right? And if you're building the software or any automation, you will be dealing with a lot of this exception, right? So some of the time you will deal with certain exception which is kind of unknown or which you have not coded for, right? So in that case, it really becomes difficult to kind of decode if certain places fail, right? So in this case, if the AI agent get to know there is something new on its execution, it will most likely do a plan B of option in order to kind of make the system whole. So even if case it is not able to correct it, so it will actually give the relevant context to the user. So whoever is kind of diagnosing it, it makes a lot more sense for them. And the exception path or the unknown path, it is very much easy to handle. Right. So that is most of it on a technical front of why you need to know agentic AI. Right. Now, let us understand the characteristics of agentic AI. Now, this is important because if you learn programming languages like Java or Python, it is important for you to know or start from the fundamentals, start from the foundation, such as learning the pillar of object-oriented programming, right? So similarly here, this agentic AI, it is built on certain characteristics, right? Now, this is the kind of fundamental characteristics, right? Now, let us try to understand them. Let's start with the goal-oriented behavior, right? So, whenever you're developing an agent, in most likely cases, you will be developing an agent that will solve for a given scenario. I mean, it will be very less likely that you'll be developing an agent that can solve many problems of the world, right? So at that time, it will be developed for just solving one particular given task, right? Now, then the system will be focused on solving that one particular goal, right? So it will be executing that plan of action. It will be just focusing on iterating just to make sure that at the end the outcome it is focused on that one particular purpose, right? Then comes the perception layer, which is like the working part of an agent, right? Now, for a human to decide or to work on a given scenario, we really need to see what we are dealing with, right? So if you want to do a work, you basically try to understand, you kind of see it through your eyes and you kind of get a visual sense of where you're acting, right? So the same goes for AI agent as well. So in this case, the system has to know on what cases, on what scenario it is dealing with, right? So what you will be doing in the sense is you will be getting the current context, which will include the current environment, the current settings, the configurations of where it is dealing with, and you will send those parameters as a context to this agent. Now that will help this agent to decide on what it has to do next, right? So after that comes a reasoning layer, which is more like a brain of this operation, right? So once you give it, okay, the instruction that it has to do, and then you also give on what context it is executing on, then it needs like a brain or a AI layer where it actually has to form a plan of action and it has to execute them, right? So that comes on a reasoning layer where with all this given data that you send, it will kind of reason and it will say, hey, okay, so with this current scenario, I actually have to do this, right? An example can be, again, if you're building a customer support agent, right? So it actually has to know on what is the environment, right? On what domain it is acting on. Maybe the responses will be different if it is like for finance or for a healthcare. So based on that, it knows, okay, what is the environment and it knows what is the single sole purpose it is dealing with, and then it formulates a plan of action and then it can decide, okay, this is a finance domain, so I have to, kind of restrict myself onto the finance domain knowledge that I've got. I'll be operating on them. So next comes the adaptability, which is one of a key feature of agentic AI. Remember in our previous example, we were talking about the unknown scenarios, the unknown exceptions. So even something new happens on your environment, this agent should not break, but it should be able to work on that, right? Now that is the key feature of agentic AI compared to any other technology that you have got. It actually has to make sense on what environment it has to deal with. So even if something new comes in, it has to understand what the new means, and it maps it back to the requirement or to the instructions, and then it is able to kind of act upon it, right? So given any kind of new environment condition with this given context of its goal to solve, it will be able to adapt its nature, right? Then after that comes the autonomy part of it. So as an agent, you want to build this so that it can take most of its decision on its own, and it can, do it on the real environment, right? And that characteristics where it can operate on its own with having less supervision or no human supervision is called autonomy, right? The level of autonomy will depend on different conditions and different scenarios, right? For example, if you're dealing with something like a finance domain, you want to have a control autonomy in case, right? Where you will be having this agent to decide, okay, what it actually has to do next, and where the scenarios that involves much of a risk or much of like a downstream impact, you will basically need to validate that with the human before it executes that on a real environment. And those were the fundamentals of this entire agentic AI. Now let us see of how all this kind of works together in a real practical scenario, right? So let's say we are building an agent for the customer support use case, right? And this is for a finance domain. So in this case, the very first thing you'll be starting with is to giving the instructions to this agent on what it has to do, on what are the different kind of scenarios it can encounter, right? And in that scenarios, what it actually has to do, what tools it has to execute, and all these instructions will be given to this agent, right? So now let us run this through a live scenario. You get a new email. Now let's say this customer support agent, it will read through that email, it will understand what the sentiment of that email is. Or let's say it is like a positive sentiment, it will just send like a thank you note back to that email. Or let's say if it is something like a negative, it will pass that along to like a downstream agent to resolve it. Okay. So this primary agent, first it will go ahead and it will read that email. So now let's say we got a new email. So at the very first step, the agent will do like a plan of action on what all the different steps it has to execute in this case, right? So at very first step, it will read through that email. So in this case, maybe like we have developed a tool, something like a read email. So it will read that email, and along with that, it can pass along the given context, right? And what here the context will be, let's say, this is operating on finance domain. So it basically has to send an response, or it actually has to deal the responses in certain way, right? So that's something I can pass along as a context. Now with that, it will execute the next step. It will read that email, and after that, it will basically check, did I reached my end goal or not? And if not, it will again go back to the loop and it will execute the next step here. Now, what is the next step here? It will basically get the output from the email body or from the email, all of the parameters, and from that it will basically call another tool which can be like a sentiment analysis. Now from the sentiment analysis, let's say we got here like a positive sentiment. So if not, it will again go back to the loop and it will execute the next step. Now after that, the next step here will be, okay, this is like a positive sentiment. I have to reply back that email with like a thank you note. So in this, it can execute another tool which can be something like reply back to that email. And in this, it will give like a thank you note. It will reply back with a thank you note that is customized for this email, right? And after that, again, it will check, hey, did I reach my end goal where I was successful to complete the or the purpose for this given email, right? If the answer is yes, it will come out of the loop, right? Now, this is on a very high level of how this agent operates on a real environment, right? So using all the fundamental concept that we have learned, um, about the goal-oriented behavior where this agent was built for a certain set of conditions, certain set of scenarios. Then it actually goes back with the perception where it actually sees, okay, what this email mean on the real environment, and also with all the context that this is built for a finance domain. Then comes with the reasoning layer where it actually has to decide what it has to do next, what is the response it has got, and using this looping mechanism, it will be able to execute or work towards the end goal, right? And if you notice here, this entire agent can operate with a complete autonomy, right? And again, if anything new comes in, or if it is operating on a new support inbox as well, this agent would be able to work, right? Because it is adaptable to any condition, right? Now, I hope that all this makes sense in understanding what the system is all about and how they operate. And I also hope that this video was useful for you. Thank you.